Hey, Comeback Nation, Barry William Magliotti here, your host of the Comeback Game podcast. And today I invite back one of our previous guests, Scott Shay, who is the co-founder and chairman of Signature Bank. He's also the chairman of investment committee of the ETH Fund, an Israel private equity firm. He's also a passionate community activist as well. Scott started an educational program, chaired several major Jewish educational programs, and with his wife Susan started a Hebrew school. He's the author of a book, In Good Faith, Questioning Religion and Atheism and Getting Our Groove Back. And on today's episode, Scott tunes in from the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic in New York, where they've been on lockdown for almost 90 days now. They've seen a lot of deaths. They've seen a lot of different situations and challenges, both within his life and with his business as well. Running a large bank, they are seen as an essential service and have had to remain open during these times. And we dive into understand a bit more around how COVID-19, the pandemic, has affected him and the business and the local community, whether or not any of these conspiracy theories are true in his opinion. And also we start to look at understanding like what has been the good or the opportunities that have started to come through this pandemic. I honestly believe, like Napoleon Hill once said, that with any crisis, with any adversity comes a seed of equal or greater opportunity. And although for many people right now, it might be too soon to understand what that opportunity is, I do believe that through the other side of this, we're going to see a massive revolutionary shift in human consciousness, in the earth, in us as humanity. And I'm staying tuned for what that's going to be coming up in the future. So looking forward to sharing this episode. Let's jump over now and start a conversation with Scott Shay from Signature Bank. Scott, welcome back to the show today. Pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be back. Nice to see you, Barry.
You too. Mate, very interesting times right now. You're dialing in from New York, which is one of the hot spots of the current COVID-19 pandemic. How are you guys doing over there?
We are doing not so well, to be perfectly honest. We are having it's a continuing emergency. It's a continuing lockdown. I'm sitting here today on May 27th, and we are in full lockdown, although the bank is open because we are considered an essential service, and indeed we are an essential service.
Yeah. So how long have you guys been on lockdown for?
We have been on lockdown since March 12th. I was on my way to a Broadway show. One of our clients was opening on Broadway, and 90 minutes before the opening, the governor announced that we were going on lockdown, no groups above 50. Well, actually, he didn't announce it that day. He announced no gatherings above 50 people would be permitted. So the Broadway show was canceled. Literally, I had a ticket in my hand. And the next day, he announced the full lockdown, which was here in New York, it was pretty draconian.
Yeah. So you guys are close to 3 months in lockdown. Are you seeing any decrease in numbers? Like what's the kind of general vibe of what's actually happening with COVID-19?
Well, it was eerie because in the beginning, in the first days, the sirens would be blaring every day, multiple times. And it's a scary sound to constantly, I mean, sirens. We knew people and know people who had COVID-19. A number of folks at the bank had it. I think we talked about it in the last time we were together. It's my custom to call all my colleagues on their birthday, even though they're over 1,500. So I took it upon myself to call all those who were COVID-19 positive. And it was a good, it was more than 2 dozen. And it ranged from people being mildly ill to people who couldn't get a full sentence out without taking multiple breaths, to people saying, pray for me. It was all over. Thank God everyone at the bank who came down with it, some very severely, is doing fine. But during that period of time, I mean, literally people in New York, we were hearing of a death, within 1 degree removed, a death a week. In some neighborhoods, there was also neighborhood by neighborhood, because one neighborhood in New York has had so far 652 deaths per 100,000. It's a lot of deaths. Other neighborhoods have done much better, but overall, if the pace continues, and I'm amazed I'm saying this, but if the pace continues and we're much lower than we were before, I mean, we're much, much better off. By the end of August, 1 in 500 people in New York will have passed away, excess deaths from COVID-19, which is 1 in 500 is a big number when you're thinking.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of those folks are older, people will say, but nonetheless, they're passing before their time.
Mm. So for you guys over there, is there any end in sight? Like I can imagine that you've been there for, as I said, 3 months now. Is there any end in sight when things will start to look to open back up?
Yes, I think there's tremendous pressure to open back up because of the economic repercussions. It's been really devastating to many small businesses who don't have that much rope.
No.
And suddenly they go from being a thriving business, enough to pay the owner, enough to pay managers, people working there, to no revenues, but they still have lease payments, they still on their equipment, they still have rent to pay, or they need to get it deferred. And it's been devastating for some of those people. I know I'm concerned that some folks will just decide not to reopen. And that is already happening with some restaurants and some folks in the hospitality world. I think it's going to happen to a degree in the theater world. You know, we're very big on theater in New York. Mm-hmm. And I think some organizations won't be able to make it through. So it's something where I've been working. In the beginning of the crisis, I was kidding, but I was really, I was on 24/6 because there were constant issues. On the other end, I think we've passed through that point of people not knowing what to do next, people just needing someone to talk to. So we passed that stage to a stage of, okay, what am I going to do now? What can I do with my bank? What can I do with our small business administration loans? What can I do with family and friends? How can I get my business going? How can I reinvent myself? A lot of restaurants here in New York have reinvented themselves to takeout. And they're doing, takeout businesses. Bars are having outdoor walk-up windows. And so people are doing everything they can to reinvent themselves. But, as you can tell, I probably missed 2 haircuts, and I'm only going to have 1 haircut at the end. So there will be revenues that will just never come back. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, like no doubt you've seen it. There's been a lot of different theories on COVID-19. Have you got any viewpoints around any of that? Like obviously it's something that's devastating. It's had a massive effect on lives. It's had a huge effect on businesses, on the economy, on the financial situation of the world. Have you got any viewpoints around, some of the stuff that's been floating by?
Oh, you mean the conspiracy theories and the like? Well, I'm an occasional columnist for Asia Times, so I am pretty tuned into at least Hong Kong and which is also an area that's got a lot going on right now. I don't need to tell you.
Yeah.
But I do have my ear to the ground on what's going on in Asia, in China. And I would say this, I'll just give you my opinion, and I can't prove any of this.
Yeah.
I don't think this was willful or mindful, because if it were done that way, it would have been worse. And the consequences would have been worse. I think it could have been due to an accident in a lab. There's certainly, that is a possibility. And there hasn't been any evidence to rule that out. Clearly there is a level 4 lab in Wuhan, and it's a possibility. And credible people have raised that as a possibility because they do work on coronavirus there. So can it be ruled out? I don't know how you rule that out.
Yeah.
If you were to come up, if you put on the evil conspiracy theory hats, well, if China wanted to export a virus, it would have probably been worse than killing 1 in 500 people. So I don't think so. But I will say this: I think this virus does tell us one thing, or the consequences of the virus tells us one thing, is that transparency is critical. Democracy is messy. Free societies are messy. I can tell you here in the United States, people are constantly yelling at each other, from the right, from the left, but things get out. And unfortunately, in December, it was probably known in China that COVID-19 was communicable from human to human. And that got communicated by Taiwan, for example, to the WHO, but it didn't get officially acknowledged until January 25th. And with 2020 hindsight, 3 weeks, is the world on something like, on any epidemiological model. Epidemiology is all about, R naught. And if you can catch that early on, literally, these are all exponential curves. So if there's one serious regret that I think the world should have, is that we didn't take the actions in early January that we took in March, because we might have been able to suppress the virus entirely.
It's a very touchy subject, right? On the one hand, you've got death, right? You've got a lot of people that have died, a lot of people have been ill. On the other side, though, you've got businesses that have collapsed. You've got financial structures that have disappeared. You've got you've got a massively higher rate of suicide, domestic violence. There's a lot of secondary consequences from this virus. So on the one hand, you've got the first round consequences, which is people dying and shutting things down and the result of that. But there's a lot of secondary consequences that we're going to deal with long after this virus is gone. Do you feel that we handled it the right way? Like, obviously, you guys are at one of the hot spots of the world. New York's been hit. It's up there, right?
As bad as Wuhan.
Yeah. And do you feel that things were handled the way they should? Like, do you feel that it was the rightful action to just shut down businesses, to go into complete lockdown, to try to kind of suppress what's been coming through?
Well, I think so. There's a so-called Swedish experiment. I'm sure you've heard about that.
Yeah.
And I think that the problem to some degree is that, not that we listen too much to experts, that we listen too little. I mean, one of the things we should have done initially here in New York, and that Sweden should have done, is to isolate the most vulnerable, the nursing homes. I mean, part of the reason that we have neighborhoods where 1 in 652, where 652 out of 100,000 people are dead so far, is that there were nursing homes. There were, I don't know what the term is in your regions in Australia, but aged homes for the aged.
Yeah.
And when the disease got into those homes, it just ravaged them. And in the beginning, New York, sadly, had nursing homes take COVID positive patients. And once a COVID positive patient entered a nursing home, it was a disaster. So you had people dying before they should have. So we should have probably immediately, faster than we did, locked down the hospitals and the nursing homes. And we didn't do that fast enough. And then to have tried social distancing in a more serious way longer. The social distancing that we really did in New York was at most 2 weeks, and then we went to lockdown. So we actually don't know where things would be. But we have a serious issue in New York, and this was a major vector of the virus, which is the subway systems. Because in the subway system, I don't know if you've been to New York, but you're up close and personal with people you never met before, and you're breathing on them, and there's nowhere to go. And that's how we deal with the subway system. And when we go out of lockdown, I think is going to be a major issue. But I think we could have tried a to do the reverse quarantine, to say, okay, if you're over 60 or 65, stay home, get your food delivered, don't go out, and to have let everybody else do social distancing. Mm-hmm. Having said that, I can tell you, because I called folks at the bank who were ill, we had some folks who were in their 40s, in their 30s, who had moderately severe cases, but not where they had not where they had to go to the hospital. So folks who had and have secondary conditions, what are they called? Premorbidity or comorbidity or pre-existing conditions, whatever you want to say. Those folks probably should have been granted unlimited leave by the government and said, okay, we'll just pay for you to stay home for a while, and suppressed it the other way.
Yeah.
But at a certain point in New York, we actually had no choice because it was out of control here. I mean, in the end, we needed to do something. So we needed to do a lockdown in the end.
And to be honest, like a lot of people didn't take this seriously.
Right.
A lot of people didn't take it seriously. Like I was living in Bali at the start of the year, and I met some people that had been flown there from China, from Shenzhen, because things were starting. This is back in late Jan, Feb. Managers of hotels and so forth, and they were flown there because because of this virus, and they were flown there for like 2 weeks of leave to then come back again. And people knew, like I left Bali on the 23rd of March. I had to come back to Australia for some business. Haven't been able to get back since. But before I left, it's like gyms were still operating. Restaurants are still operating. Like Australia was all but shut down. And yet over there, people were just feeling like they're immune. And it wasn't just there though, like it was even in Australia too, people were feeling like they're immune. And it wasn't until this thing continued to go on and build momentum and speed, and obviously the media got behind it, that people started to take it a bit more seriously. And I guess that's a personal responsibility we have too, as being human in this regard. So had they have said, hey, 60, 65, stay at home, the rest of you social distance, I don't know whether people would listen to that either and done the social distancing thing, because I don't know, like, I think sometimes we tend to feel we're a bit immune to these types of things.
Well, it's part of our evolution. I mean, we don't tend to take risks because we're always, just as, our deep reptilian brains are always on the alert, but don't tend to react to risks unless there's something, serious that's going to require us to expend energy. On the other hand, once our behavioral immune system is triggered, we tend to go the other way. And really
absolutely
super duper compensate.
Yeah, black and white, there's no middle ground.
And explode the actual level of risk in our minds. And that's what we've done. But in the end, we had to shut down here in New York because it truly was getting out of control. I mean, I can tell you, we know a lot of people who were impacted, and it was just growing at an exponential rate.
I wonder if this is just a thought off the top of my head now as we're having this conversation. Like, I wonder if this shows the lack of trust we have in our leadership of the country. Like I just looking at more of a micro level, I look at my business. It's like, if I was to share with my employees something that had to happen, we went through COVID-19. There was cause for us to change direction very fast in a few areas, and the team immediately jumped behind me to do that. Right? Not even a second question. And I just wonder, at some bigger level, is this kind of showing us maybe the lack of trust that we have with the leadership of the world, of our state, of our country, potentially, that we don't, that what's shared doesn't bear a lot of weight, that we still think that we know better. Maybe.
Well, your country, Australia, frankly, is a beacon of light in this, because once the Prime Minister and the head of the labor unions, who's as far to the left as the Prime Minister, I don't want to say to the right, but he's, there's certainly polar opposites, and everyone on both parties got behind it. I mean, there was a sense of unanimity that for that sadly we didn't get here in the United States, where you have, I mean, even today, if you pick up the New York Times, they're talking about, well, most of this is taking place in so-called blue districts. As a matter of fact, 12 congressional districts have a hugely disproportionate number of COVID-19 deaths. 12, our House of Representatives, our districts for representation, and they happen to be very Democratic. And so you end up with Democratic strongholds saying, well, we really have a problem here. You have states like Nebraska and Montana, which have many more Republicans, who are saying, well, we don't even. I talked to someone. We have someone in our firm who works in Idaho for a particular reason. Said they haven't heard of really COVID-19. There's really no reason. Nobody's doing anything. And I will say this to the positive about coming together, despite the fact that the virus hugely disproportionately impacted Democratic districts. I mean, Congress did pass essentially unanimously here in the United States trillion-dollar packages, multi-trillion-dollar packages to help those unemployed, to help those impacted. So, I think we may have actually in the United States, and I'm hopeful that we've already gone and had peak polarization, and that the virus is going to emphasize to people that, clearly have a common humanity. And we need to deeply think about, we don't want something bad to happen to somebody else because it could just as well happen to us.
Yeah.
Or to me, or to you.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful.
I guess that gets to my next question is like, and it might be too soon, but challenge and adversity always shares with us like gifts of opportunity, gifts of realization, gifts of growth and insight. And as I said, it might be too early, but have you noticed yet, over the last 3 months, any gifts that have come through this experience for you, for your community, for your business?
Well, I will say that it has made a coming together. You mentioned your business. When we had something here called the Payroll Protection Program. It was started by Congress, and it was $600 billion that was to be allocated to small and medium-sized businesses. But it was allocated through the banks. And it was announced on like March 27th, and it went into production on like April 7th or something, very few days. And we turned our bank upside down. We actually took 200 people who were doing one thing and moved them to doing this. We had people who were senior vice presidents doing essentially data entry, key punch card, typing almost. I mean, it was that basic, and everybody pitched in. Everybody knew this was important. I talked to someone today who was working on the project, and she said to me, when we were working on these companies and would see the names, they're small restaurants, they're little companies, they're ballet studios, they're coffee shops, and small plumbing operations. They'd say, we really felt like if we could help these folks access the money, that's a good thing. And I do think people are recognizing faith a little more. I mean, the first time I was on your show, I spoke about my book, In Good Faith.
Yeah. And
it's interesting, actually, the Audible book sales on that are up, possibly because people are at home listening to it. But my point is that I think, there's a sense that one thing that this virus has done is reminded us of our humanity and reminded us that hubris is really dangerous, just like what you were saying before, well, we're immune. Well, the truth of the matter is nobody's immune. As long as you're a human being, and even if you're not a human being, but if you're a bat, you're not immune either.
Yeah.
So you got to get with the program to try to help humanity somehow. And that might be a positive that comes out of it.
Yeah.
We're also being reminded, I'll tell you one other thing. We're being reminded what a clean environment can look like.
Mm.
And it may be an incentive to say, hey, those skies are really blue. And the East River looks a lot prettier.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Reminder of faith, humanity, and what a clean environment looks like. And maybe people respect the environment a lot more when things start to open back up.
I hope so.
Yeah. Scott Shay, it's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything else you want to leave the viewers and listeners with today before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I would say one thing. Look, I think everybody has to think, how can they help in this worldwide? Because we can say, why did this happen to us? We were talking about sort of very serious, why did this happen? How did this happen? I think the thing everybody needs to focus on, including myself, I'm totally part of it, is, okay, this has happened. What can we do about it? Where can we go from here? And if you can do just a little something, it doesn't have to be a big something, right? You know, then it's all been, you know, we've made the planet a better place.
I love that. And it's that old saying that small hinges swing big doors. Everyone's got a part to play and a responsibility to work out what that part is. Yeah, love that. Mate, thank you so much. I feel super blessed and privileged to have you on the show again. Any of you guys that are watching, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to comment below, tag us in there. More than happy to help you out. And please share this around to someone else who you think needs to hear this message as well. Scott, it's been a pleasure. I'll let you get on with your evening.
Evening, yes.
And
you too. And you your day. Enjoy.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
If you're in a position that many of our clients were before joining us, which is that your business is controlling you rather than you controlling your business, we would love to have a chat to you to see whether or not we might be the right fit to partner with you to help you grow and succeed in business. And over the past 8 years, we've helped hundreds of business owners around the world to grow, scale, and succeed in business. Many of our clients report that we've helped them to triple their profits and double their time off in 12 months or less. If you jump onto YouTube and notice the hundreds of testimonies, you'd see that this is a common theme amongst them. If you're a business owner that's generating more than $300,000 a year in annual revenue, whether it's $500 million, $5 million, even $10 million a year, and you're looking to take your business and your life to the next level, we might be able to help. If you're noticing that your business is lacking structure, maybe systems or processes, maybe you're not quite attracting enough or the right type of quality leads, making enough sales, or maybe you're even having issues finding, hiring, retaining, and training the right team members, we could be a fit for you. Ultimately, we believe that we never have business problems, we have personal problems that are expressed through our business. And a lot of the work we do is with you as a business owner, helping you to constantly upgrade the way that you see life, the way that you make decisions, and the way that you help construct a profitable and purpose-driven business. In order for us to do that though, you need to book in a quick 15-minute application call with one of our scaling specialists here at the Game Changers. Through that 15-minute call, we're gonna ask you a bunch of questions to see if or how we might better help you. If we can't help you, we'll let you know politely and do our best to point in the direction of someone that can. However, we can help you. We'll look at booking you a 1-hour game plan session where we're gonna dive a lot deeper into where you and your business are at right now, where it is that you want to go in the next 3, 5, and 10 years time, and what are the potential roadblocks or challenges or even opportunities that are along the journey in order for you to get there faster. If you're really feeling that it's time for you to experience the love and the joy of running a business again, if you're really wanting to experience a business that does actually operate without you while still producing profit, we may very well be the right fit. So book in a 15-minute call, we can have a chat and see where we go from there. My name is Brad Bodidi, and thanks for listening. Hopefully we get a chance to talk soon.